Hey, we're back again. So this is part two of our series here. What we're going to do here is I'm going to go over in the syllabus a couple of things. So I want to show you that first, and then we're going to go over some graphic design basics, just some things that I feel everybody should know to kind of have a baseline for all of this. I'm going to show you a couple of links online to a couple of different websites. There's a whole extensive long list of things that I could show you, but I'm not going to do that. I got some of them created as a document that's in the guides section that you can take a look at. Just different websites to go to or YouTube channels to subscribe to and that sort of thing to learn a little bit more than what I'm going to be showing you, um, for you to just kind of learn a little bit better. Um, and I'll cover a couple of other things, just basic, simple information that, again, everybody should know. So let's get started with that. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, here is our syllabus for this course. Raster imaging for our online course here for the summer. Again, in the syllabus, when you get it, my contact information will be at the top. You'll have a course description of the information. There will be the textbook will be listed here for you to take a look at and be able to get to. There's even a link to the Creative Cloud subscription system. We use Adobe Creative Cloud here. With the Creative Cloud subscription, it will give you access to Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Adobe Animate, which is some of the programs that we will teach throughout our different classes, plus Adobe XD and a few other programs that are supporting programs that we will use throughout the different classes that we teach. So it is a good idea for you to subscribe to it. It costs you for the year right now, I think roughly $230. That'll cover you per year. It's not that much money, even though it sounds like it's a lot, but it's not that much for what you get. And quite honestly, the amount of work that you can be doing and the amount of work we are doing, it's worth the money having it and just paying for the whole thing. If you can't pay for the whole thing up front, I think it's maybe like $20 a month. If you want to play on a month to month type of plan, it's just less expensive in the long run to just pay it all at once if you can. But if you're able to do that, make sure that you make that happen. If you cannot do that, are there other options for different programs you could possibly use? There probably are, but for this class, there's not that many options that are free for you to get or that's free online for you to use. But do some exploring. Just, do some quick Google searching for free alternatives to Photoshop. See if there's anything out there that you may be able to use that's comparable to how the program would work. Maybe you can use it, but it's kind of doubtful. Hours. The lectures are going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Um, for the class. If you can be here during that time, well, you don't have to be in class, so it's an online class. So, but the videos and everything for the lecture series will be available during that time. So you'll have access to it by then. If you don't have access to it at that moment, it could be a glitch or something that goes on, so it'll be available later on. We have Open Lab every Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in room C24. So building C, room 24 is an open lab for you to be able to come in, uh, log into any one of the lab machines and work on your work. Working there, my suggestion, always have an external hard drive of some sort that you can plug in, whether it's a flash drive or just an external hard drive to plug in and do your work off of that drive. Because anything that you put on those computers in the lab can now belong to the school. We'll talk about copyright as a whole thing. That there's going to be a page available to you in the student resources about copyright and making sure that your intellectual property is held on to. Um, you want to do all your work on that drive. So you want to save files on that drive and pull files from that drive to work on. You never want to save anything directly on the computer if you don't have to. And because it's a lab, if you save it directly on that computer, when you come back to that computer later, it probably won't be there because it may get erased. So you want to make sure that you have something that you can hold on to your work um, as you need to. Okay, moving forward. Scrolling down, course learning objectives, no show and work ethics. We talked about that already. Make sure that you're doing that. This date needs to be changed. Good Lord, I did not update that. Um, but the no-show assignment is due by this Wednesday or Thursday, from what I remember. Late work is not accepted. Late work is not accepted. Make sure that you are doing your work on time, because in the real world, your work has to be put in by the deadline, and if it's not, you're going to get fired. So just we kind of get you into the work of doing that right now. Everything has to be admitted into Blackboard in some kind of way, shape, or form. One thing that will happen later on, the requirements for some of the labs and projects require you to give me the full Photoshop multi-layered file. Sometimes those are going to be way too big. So in the brief, it will tell you how to zip everything together to make one zip file, but that may still be too big. So if you have Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive. You can make a folder called, submissions or whatever you want to call it. Put your zip files in that folder and share the link and put that into Blackboard. I'm telling you that now. I'm going to tell you that again. You asked me about it. I'm going to tell you that same process. Get your cloud service drive, save your files in there, take the zip file that you create, make a link to it, share a link to it, and put that into Blackboard with that shared link. That'll be the assignment submission, and that will be fine if you need to do that. So just if that's the question, you can ask that, and we'll go from there. So course grading, there's going to be 6 assignments weekly that's going to be allowed for you to do. The assessments, I'm sorry, not assignments, assessments. I think there should be 8, not 6. I may have to update that. I got to count again because I'm just thinking through with my ADD brain if I got the right numbers in here. There will be labs and there will be projects, and then there'll be one final project. The final project is going to be a little bit bigger, more involved. You're going to have more time in which to do it. You'll have probably about 3 weeks in which to get that done, I think, where you concentrate on just that. No lectures, no labs, no assessments to have to do. The final exam is going to be the last week for 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the 28th through the 30th. And I think I put that information in here. That the final exam will be available at that time, and it's going to be proctored, which means that you will have to have your webcam on. You have to clear off your desk and be able to do the exam that way. If you cannot do that at home, you can come to the library on campus and then tell them that you need to do a final exam, and they'll take you to the computer lab where you can do that proctored exam at that time. So you'll be able to make that happen. Let's see. Here is our course calendar. So here in our course calendar, first week, which is what we're in right now, doing this particular Tuesday, course introduction and graphic design basics. We're talking about that right now. And then I'm going to talk about Adobe Bridge and metadata on Thursday. So that will be available on Thursday. Our first lab will be assigned and and as well as the assessments and the no-show assignment. All those are going to be due within this week coming up. So make sure that you get this work done quickly as possible. So May 22nd so today is the 20th. So you have Thursday is when the no-show is available, is due. So make sure you get that as well as that discussion done and submitted, so that way you can get that out of the way. It takes you less than 5 minutes to probably do each one of them. So get that done. The rest of the consecutive weeks, you see how it goes through. So we'll have lectures that go all the way up to week 8. Um, nope, that'll go all the way to week 6 is going to be our last lecture. So week 6 is going to be our last lecture time. And then after that, your projects, all your projects is going to end up becoming due. So you have one project that'll be due early, like on June 10th, for your first project. But then the project 2, which is your social media project, that's due on June 1st. And then the last project, which is your final, that's due, scrolling down, that's due on July 22nd. So that's due the last week of actual class. During the rest of the time, you will have the ability, and I will be available. I'll make myself available for office hours and everything else for you to talk to me about the project, the final project they're doing, making sure that you got the right information in place. help you find resources and that sort of thing, and create and you know, consult with you about things as you need, so that way you can get things done. During that time, also, there will be a study guide that will be posted for the final, just kind of giving you an idea of how to study for the final and be able to pass it. Because I want everybody to do well. I want everybody to do good. I'm not here to fail people because that is ridiculous. I'm here to make sure all of you pass with a B or better. I know passing is a C or better, but C is a failure in my household. So I need you to pass with a B or better. And that's the goal that you should be having for yourself, is to ace this whole thing. I make this thing where it's good, accessible, but it's not that difficult to do. Rest of it, you see the different lab assignments, and there are one, two, three, four, five, yeah, six labs. I thought I had that right. Six labs, three projects there that need to be done. So make sure that you get this work done, folks, and you will have a great time in what we do. All right, so that's that. So let's get down to our next piece, which is this, the graphic design basics. Now, you do have a folder that is called guides. There'll be a link in your Blackboard for it. It takes you to this particular folder that you'd be able to download, this guides folder, and it will have this graphic design basics I'm about to walk you through. It'll also have in it a list of links that I will probably keep adding to. I may do that, but I may not. And just talk about the different things that may be discovered and found, because there's a ton of stuff that's out there in the world. And I'm just trying to guide you to the stuff that I would recommend. And it's not even close, you know, everything that's out there. It's just some things. But there's also these two PDFs. Let me see if I can open these real quick. In my Acrobat so you could see them. One is just an overview of Photoshop in general, you know, just kind of giving you a good work overview about how everything is laid out and where everything is. I'll talk about some of these things, but not everything. And then this is, you know, how to create a new document in Photoshop, in case you've never done that before, never used Photoshop before. Again, I'll touch on some of these things, but not cover every little small nuanced detail. So that's what these are for, to cover the details. So that way you have a chance to kind of look at that stuff and go through it. All right. Let's talk about these graphic design basics. So, pixel-based programs, that's what Photoshop is. It works on a pixel-based program. Now, what is a pixel? A pixel is a little small square of color information that shows up on a screen. So, monitor screens, television screens, your phone screens, a camera screen, anything that is a monitor of some sort, a screen of some sort, showing you some type of information, it's made up of pixels. Now, that pixel can also be called a raster object or a raster image. You'll probably hear that. That's why we call it raster imaging, because raster is just another technical term for pixel. It's the same interchangeable words. Um, Terms that I use in here when it comes to a raster or pixel-based program is image, picture, raster, pixel-based image, things like that. I'll use those type of terms. Um, because with a vector program, which is like Illustrator, those terms are using things like I use graphic or object or vector, Bezier, paths, you know, when I'm talking about that. If you take Mr. Strength's vector class, he'll talk about this sort of similar to me with some of these things. In a pixel-based program, you have a term called resolution. Resolution is the number of pixels per inch of your image. So those pixel squares make up the image that's on that screen, the number of pixels that make up that image, because that's different than the monitor. So the monitor has its own pixels with its own resolution, number of pixels that make up that screen. But then the image that shows on that screen has its own resolution of how many pixels that make up that image. And that is where things get kind of weird. So when you go on, I'll use Walmart for example. You go in there and look at their TVs. You'll see 780p, 1020p, 4K, 8K screens, right? That's how many pixel squares make up that screen. So there's 720 pixels that make up this screen, usually measured diagonally across the monitor itself, the screen itself. There's 720 pixels diagonally that make up that screen. 1020, 4000, 8000, you know, with the different brands and quality. When you look at them side by side to each other, the one at 720p looking at the same video or whatever, it doesn't look as good as the one that's in 1080p or the one that's in 4K because there's more pixels. Because there's more pixels, there's more information coming into your eyes when it comes to color. It does sometimes help with the clarity of the image as long as the picture was shot correctly at the good resolution for a good clear picture and in focus. It's going to look a lot clearer, a lot more in focus in that 8K screen than it does in that 720 screen. But that's what you get. Now, for the image with the pixel per inch, this is what you have to worry about when playing in Photoshop and things like that. Because you got to think about output. Input controls your output. What you get coming into Photoshop that you're going to manipulate is going to control how the output's going to come out at the end for whatever you're doing. So you got to know what your output is. Am I using this for print? Am I using this for the web? Am I using this, for both? So if you don't know, you're going to mess up in some kind of way. You're going to give something that's way too big and the file size and the resolution is going to be too high. You're going to get something that's too small and everything looks terrible. So you got to know ahead of time. So anything that's on screen is going to have a resolution of around 96 pixel per inch. So that's the average. It could be lower all the way down to 72. It could be higher, probably all the way up to 150 or even more than that. The higher the resolution, that means there's more information in that file. So it's going to be a heavier file. So the file size is going to be larger. So you want to make sure the file size is controlled by keeping the resolution as low as you need it to be. So whenever you're doing some web design project, PowerPoint project, something for a mobile phone application, you want to make sure that the resolution is around 96 pixel per inch and not too much higher, not too much lower. At 96 pixel per inch, the file size will be pretty good for what you need for that output. Now, if you're doing video, that resolution can go somewhere between 96 all the way up to 300, and it could go higher when you're dealing with outputs of like that 8K and 4K and that sort of thing resolution. But usually HD level is about 300 pixel per inch. 96 pixel per inch is like your standard, social media video kind of resolution size. Print resolution for anything that's going to be printed. The 150 pixel per inch is the lowest, and the highest will go around 300. Now that when I say the highest, I'm talking like a movie poster, size of a print. You'll probably be up to around 300 pixel per inch. That's your standard print range. If you go larger than that, like say a billboard or those car and van wraps you see, where it's got advertising on the car or some picture or whatever on the van or whatever wrapped around in a wrap, those are going to be higher resolutions, over 300. Like for a car or van wrap is probably around 12 to 2400, depends on how clear and of a picture that you want to show. A billboard, like on the road, on the highway, that billboard could be at 300 because it's up, it's high, it's far away from you. So it doesn't have to be that clear up close. It just needs to be clear enough as you're driving past it and your eyes and brain kind of make out the fuzziness at that far of a distance. You'll still be able to make out what it is. Even though if you stood right next to that billboard, it would look real fuzzy and out of focus because it's not made to be seen that close. Versus something like a car or van wrap, you need to be able to stand right next to it and it needs to be a very clear picture. So now the resolution's got to jump up. Photoshop can handle up to 10,000 pixel per inch image. You'll never work on something that large unless you're doing something very, very specific with a very specific computer and that version of Photoshop that you're using. But on average, average person is going to be 300 pixel per inch will probably be their top number. If you're a photographer, a lot of times as a photographer, you will shoot and make sure that your resolution is at 300 pixel per inch at its max. There's usually no reason to go larger than that unless you're shooting for a specific purpose. But in general, 300 pixel per inch is going to be your shot, usage. Exact sizes for the best output or larger. That's the thing that's very important. Again, photographer, you want that 300 pixel per inch because then you can use that image for anything. As a designer, whether I'm using something for web, for print, or whatever. If I'm going to stock photo companies or talking directly to a photographer, I want to get that 300 pixel per inch range. So that way, I get the best output possible for my purpose of what I'm doing for that project. If I know that the picture's got to be larger, in other words, like I know that this project I'm building, say, banners. I had to do this project one time. I had to do banners that were going to be 12-foot tall and 80-foot wide. These are big, huge banners that were going to be wrapped around a tennis court. They were going to have like holes that were like perforated holes that was going to be printed on the material where you could see into the tennis court or see out of the tennis court, but it was still they needed to be able to see that image, around that tennis court. As you were walking up to it, you can see it, see everything at the proper angles. So that resolution had to be at like 900 pixel per inch, if I remember right, in order to print that. So I had to make sure that photographer shot the portrait shots that they needed because it was like for this particular high school, that senior class of tennis players, it was going to be a pictures of all of them and then the name of the school and that sort of thing, so that I had to put all together. So made sure with the photographer that they shot the pictures in the 4K, which will give us way more pixels than what we needed, and then made sure that I made the document at that 900 pixel per inch. So I had to make sure in Photoshop I put it in there. It took me days to work on that because that's a large file to work on. 900 pixel per inch at that size, huge. Luckily, the printer could say, "Hey, make it half of that and send it to us." And so we were able to factor it down to half the size to be able to work in Photoshop safely without things crashing. But still, you had to make sure everything worked and worked well. It was a task to kind of make that happen. But those things that you need to know. Vector-based programs. Just because you're in a raster class doesn't mean that you don't need to know anything about vector artwork. Vector artwork is made differently than pixel artwork. It's made by math instead of made by the pixels. So you get a smaller file that doesn't require that resolution, because everything is based on math. Computer can understand that a little bit better. Vector artwork is also a lot more scalable. I could take that same project that I was just talking about and make it much, much smaller in vector, but it wouldn't use the actual photos. I'd just be using the text and any illustration of those photos, right, to make it into vector artwork. But I could have made that a lot smaller in physical size and then scaled it up when it came time to print it. And it would print out just as good as it looked, on screen at that smaller size. That's the magic of it. As a matter of fact, I think that's maybe what we did. This was a few years ago, so I can't remember every project that I did, but yeah, it was probably done in the end in Illustrator, where we transferred the photos over, and I think we did make illustrations out of the photos just to get it to that smaller thing. But either way, that is a thing that can be done. You can create assets of any size and rescale them for any project, and that's what makes it kind of magical. Think of a logo, company logo. You want to create that. You want to do that in Illustrator because of that scalability. You can make the logo a nice two-dimensional flat logo with color. That's what you want to do for brand identity anyway. And then as you build that out to different projects, now you have that logo that you can now bring into Photoshop and put it on things like cups or saucers, or, you know, make it look like it's on the side of a building or anything like that. So Photoshop's job, Raster's job is to manipulate photos. Vector's job, Illustrator, is made to create things like logos and cartoon characters and anime characters and things like that. That's more of a two-dimensional scale of things versus a three-dimensional scale and manipulation, which is more of a Photoshop kind of thing. Colors. Let's talk about colors because this is kind of fun. There's two color modes that you need to be aware of in design in general, and then Photoshop specifically. RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue, specifically light. Red, green, and blue light. Why is this saying that's misspelled? Oh, this wants to have a comma. The light is measured in what are called levels. The levels are basically just levels of color. There's 256 levels for each individual color. The color range goes between 0 and 255 levels with a number because 0 is actually a value. So you will have 256 levels for each individual color. If you do the math, that's 256 times 256 times 256, 16.7 million different color combinations. That's a lot. You'll never make a document that has all those millions of color combinations. But there are photos that will have 16, 14, 13, 12 million colors in it because of different little nuanced, shadow, highlight, color tone, skin tone, all those different things are different little subtle changes, pixel by pixel of the colors. You won't be able to perceive that and notice it, but they are there. But all these 16 million colors, that's how many color combinations are mapped. There are names for them. You will later on we'll talk about how you value those colors, like what numbers that you use to get those colors. Though there are number combinations for all 16 million of those colors. Now everything that is on screen is using RGB. So you start off in Photoshop or Illustrator or any other design program in an RGB color mode all the time. Now you have another color mode that's called CMYK. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink or pigments. This is for anything that's going to be printed or anything that's going to like textiles or anything like that. That's how the color is measured there and decided there. It's measured in percentages. It's a range of 0 to 100%. There's only 65,000 colors within that CMYK range. So out of the 16.7 million, there's only 65,000 that can be made in CMYK. Why is that? CMYK uses what is called a reflective technology with the color. So all around you, there is light, whether it's artificial light when you're indoors or natural light when you're outside or a combination thereof. Light bounces around, it travels in a straight line, hits something, and bounces off of it and bounces around off of everything. The reason we see things, see physical things, is because the light hits that thing, whatever it is. Some of that spectrum of light is absorbed by that thing, and the rest is reflected back out to us. That's why we see things as different colors. So something that's black is absorbing pretty much all the color. Something that's white is pretty much reflecting all the colors. Your eyes are receptors. They receive the light. Your brain is the thing that turns that light into something that you know, right? And you are told over time, this thing that you're looking at is red, or it's blue, or it's orange, or it's yellow, or whatever name that they want to call that color that you're seeing. We physically touch that thing. Now we know that this thing is an orange ball, or this thing is a blue top. We know it by that. That's how we evolved and know how things are. All right. Yeah, science. It's a wonderful thing. It comes in handy. Now, I'm saying all this to talk about CMYK is that reflective technology that reflects the light spectrum back to us, and that's how we see things as the different colors. RGB is a projective technology. You're taking light. So the way you can explain this to people, take a stage, empty, dark, black stage. You have three spotlights. One's red, one's green, one's blue, shining onto the same spot. At 100%, you'll get a white light. Combine all three colors together. You'll get a white light shining right there because you're adding light to a dark area. That's how it works. It's additive, as they call it. If you vary the percentage value of each one of those lights, you're going to get different colors now based on those varying percentages. Those are the levels of the light shining into that dark area. So RGB is more of an additive. So the light coming out of the monitor, the light being picked up by the sensor on a camera, the light that's coming and reflecting into your eyes, that your eyes are picking up, they all perceive things in the red, green, and blue values that's coming in to you, right? That you see, that you perceive, that is seen, that is perceived and picked up by those electronic devices as well as your eyes. And it's measured in those different levels in an additive version. but the things that you see are using reflective technology, CMYK. So that's why printed things are in CMYK. Weird, fun. I'll show you a website that kind of deep dives deep into that because we don't have a class called color theory, the theory of color or the psychology of color that I had to go through in school. That was fun, and I say that with quotes. But it was fun, but it helps you learn things like this, the science behind it, the reasons behind different colors, how a color was particularly made. That's fascinating as well when it comes to your journey in graphic design. Um, when you take the page layout class and the advertising class and some of the other classes with Mr. Strength, you'll probably start talking about PICAs, PICA. It's a measurement system. Basically, to try to keep it simple with history, Adobe as a company, they started off as a type foundry, meaning they created text or different types of fonts. So different fonts that some of them you know by name. Adobe created them, owned them, hired people to create them, what have you. And they also were a big player within the printing industry. So in the printing industry, they came up with this pica measurement to make sure that universally across the world, everybody used the same unit of measure. So that way things wouldn't be off trying to convert from standard to metric and that sort of thing. You didn't have to worry about environmental issues because, like here in Atlanta, it's hot in the summer, right? Humid as well. Things like wooden rulers would shrink and grow based on the humidity level. So your measurements would be kind of off. Whereas working with the Pica system, metal rulers, that they developed in the Pica system, so nothing would ever grow and shrink and be off. So this is just the measurement system that they used. Uh, Set up for projects. This is kind of a guide to give you an idea of file types to use for your different types of things that you're making. So if you're using a photo, pixel-based object, you need to use it for print. The color mode should be in CMYK by the time you're done with the file. The resolutions should be somewhere between 150 and 300 or more as necessary. Your physical size should probably be in inches unless you're working with overseas clients. So they may have to be in millimeters, centimeters, meters, anything like that. Usually you want to make your project 20% larger than you actually need it. Why? If you're dealing with it in print, a lot of times if you make it a little bit bigger, and then send it to the printer. They'll squish it down with the instructions. You're going to tell them to put it to this size. They'll push it down to that size, and what happens for some reason, the picture will come out a little bit sharper. But you got to make sure you communicate with your print shop, to make that happen. Because if you don't communicate with them, you send them that bigger image, they're going to print it bigger, and then everybody's going to be, wondering what the hell's wrong with you because you got a picture where the edges are cut off or something like that. Different file types that you will use. You got PSD, which stands for Photoshop document. That is the native file format to Photoshop. Now you have this one called PSDC, with the C stands for cloud. That's the native file format in the cloud saving. That's becoming a big thing, but it's also having some controversy with it. When you save things to the cloud, you're saving it to your cloud storage that you will have with your account. Everybody has it. It's just like Dropbox and the rest of them. The only thing is that it's made to for movement, making you able to not be stuck on one computer with your account. You can go to another computer, log in with your account on that computer, and you'd have access to those cloud documents. The controversy that's coming up is that Adobe's been using the cloud files for their AI tools, and there's been kind of an uproar about that with AI. I'm not going. This is not the place to get into it like that, but essentially, Adobe's had to change their policy a little bit and change up how their AI tools work. That if you're going to allow it to use your cloud documents, it's used just for your stuff and not for anybody else's. But then that adds in a whole nother book of worms where what if your document now goes out to somebody else? Now they have access to the AI stuff that you used and blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of things that go in there. But that's just how it kind of goes through. So it becomes a thing. Um, but it's there. So make sure you use it if you wish to use it. Then you have TIFF. Now, TIFF is tagged information file format, is the originating file format, actually, not just for Photoshop, but for any pixel-based program that needed to save its file. Everyone has a native file format, and TIFF was the original one. So if you need to save a TIFF file, you're saving it's being saved just like a Photoshop file, multiple layers, support of everything that's in Photoshop. It's just being made as a TIFF file for, through Photoshop. If you had someone that was not using Photoshop and they needed to look at your file, you can save that Photoshop file as a TIFF file and send it to them. They should be able to see it. A lot of companies, because of the internet, a lot of companies want to use this, an uncompressed JPEG file for storage. Problem: JPEG files are made for the internet. They're made as a compressed file that can be sent across the internet at a small file size. And then when it gets to the other end of the recipient, you can see that colorful picture. The compromise, though, when you made the JPEG file is the compressed part. Compressing it will throw away color quality and image quality to get it to that smaller file size. Some companies want you to use what is called an uncompressed JPEG file, which is basically a JPEG file with the maximum with taking away the compression of it. So it's the minimum compression possible to save it to archive their files. The problem is that JPEG files don't support multiple layers. You cannot edit or re-edit that JPEG file unless you're starting all over again. And so saving it as a archive file or holding on to it, you kind of lose the ability to make edits. And even though it's on uncompressed JPEG, it's still compressed a little bit. Don't like doing that. If you can, TIFF files are going to be your best bet to hold on to as a uncompressed file that could be archived. It's just going to take up more space on the hard drives because they're bigger with all the multiple layers and everything. That's why the cloud documents became kind of a big deal with things. Now, photos that are going to be used on screen. As you can see, RGB color mode, resolution is at 96. Size is going to be in pixels, and you want it the exact size you need it to be, because if you make it any larger, same thing with the resolution being larger, it makes the file size bigger. It takes longer for it to download. File types, you got PSD and PSDC. We talked about that already. You got the JPEG file that I just talked about being compressed. You also have PNG, which stands for Portable Network Graphics, PINGs as they call them. And then you have GIF. GIF stands for GIF files, not GIF. GIF is peanut butter. Okay, pausing for the joke. Okay, now moving forward. The GIF file format was the first one. It held only 256 colors at its maximum, so it wasn't real good for photos, but good for logos and things like that. You have animated GIFs for banners and things, banner ads and things like that that could be used for animated things. Then the JPEG file came out, and that was better for photos. But again, I talked about the compression thing. You had a range from 1 to 10, where 1 is the most compressed, where it looks terrible, but it has the most compression on it, but it looks the worst, but it's the smallest file size. And then 10 would be the least compressed, the best it looks, but the file size is larger. So it's a trade-off. Now you got these portable network graphics. It's the best of both worlds. It has all the colors, doesn't have to be compressed, so you get a nice colorful picture. It's a little larger than the JPEG file would be, but still smaller in size. It supported the transparency that you got with the GIF files, so it could be animated, but you have to animate it through a program like Adobe Flash, or now it's called Adobe Animate, or some other animation program. You could take that PNG file of that thing, whatever it is, with its transparency, bring it into the animation program and animate it if you needed to. And you can also use it across the internet too. So it's a new thing. Graphics like your vector files. This gives you kind of a guide for those. And for text, same deal. And I just messed something up. For text, you have those files with your text. They can be Word documents or Google Doc files or any other type of text file format. But just make sure that you're doing your spelling grammar check way ahead of time, because you see how I got like the underlines and that sort of thing. You don't have that in your Adobe programs. They don't work well. So you want to make sure that you do your spelling grammar check way ahead of time and get that corrected before you start to bring that by import or copy and paste into your Adobe programs. So this guide here is there for you to use, to come back to refer to anytime you need to. Don't know what I did. So that way you have that. And as far as, because this is getting kind of long, as far as these references to files, I'm just going to go over a couple of them just real quick. So there's, so this here. There we go. This is the file for all the links. There's a bunch of them in here covering a bunch of different things. So the difference between pixel and raster, if you need to know that, there's this cool little website from Shutterstock, little page that talks about that. It kind of gives you a visual idea of what vector artwork looks like, what pixel artwork looks like, especially if you zoom in on it, where you can see the difference. See, pixel artwork is going to look kind of, hate saying this word, looks pixelated, meaning it's going to look a little, hey, what happened? It's going to look a little worse. Stop it. A little worse for wear as you zoom in on it, where you start seeing the different squares of pixels. Whereas vector artwork looks a lot smoother because of the shapes that you're creating. So it's going to be kind of the stuff like that. That's going to be here. Pixel versus raster. Adobe has its own help center. So if you have issues or things that you need to know about how the program works, you can go to that. You get a lot of information on there. YouTube has a lot of stuff. And there's a whole graphic design video series that goes over a lot of, there it is. That goes over a lot. It's a whole playlist that's been created that goes over a lot of stuff in the graphic design. It's real good to take a look at these videos on your own time, or if you're like cleaning up the house, or just want to have something on like a background information. This is good because you'll learn by osmosis. Just learn by listening, and you'll get a lot of good information there. But there's also a lot of different YouTube channels that I put in here that cover like font and typography. This is pretty entertaining. I'll show you this with coolers and color matters in a second. YouTube channels to register to and kind of subscribe to, because a lot of what you're going to learn outside of class is going to be through YouTube. YouTube University is going to help you with a lot of stuff. So subscribe and get into those different things. For anybody that's a photographer, there's lookup tables that are free. So you always want to get those because they will help you. For those not a photographer, a lookup table is basically being able to colorize your picture so it looks different than what you actually shot. Every movie, every TV show, almost every picture that you've seen that's been processed has some type of lookup table applied to it to kind of change the mood, give like an idea of daytime or nighttime, or enhance the picture or images or the video in some kind of way. So it's always good to kind of look at that sort of thing. So that's what this is for. So now website stuff. I want to show you a couple of things. Number one, Adobe's website is where you go to get the programs, of course. This is my Creative Cloud account, so you can see what I got there with that account. I'm trying to get to where explore plans. Here we go. So view plans. There we go. I want to get to that to show you. It will get to it. Come on. Come on, hamsters. Get to working. I just want to show you that with Creative Cloud, all apps, if you go as a student and teacher section right there, and look at buying it, it's $19.99 a month for the annual subscription. So you're getting the annual subscription, but you're paying for it monthly. All right. And if you want, do I have to go to buy now in order to do this? Trying to see if I can do this without. Yeah, here we go. I just wanted to show you. So when you do the buy now, you get the payment plan of doing $19.99 a month, or you could do the annual prepaid plan of $239, so 240 bucks. I usually do that one. Where me as a teacher, I'm paying that because I know I'm going to be using it not only to teach off of, but I'm going to be using it as my freelance business, and working, doing work. For yourself, if you do it month to month, you have an option to cancel right at the beginning. But after that, you can't cancel. So if you decide, oh, I'm not going to use this anymore because it's just graphic design is not for me, you still got to pay the full 19.99 a month until you get to the end of that year. Um, and they will come after you for it. So you can't cancel it at any time. They say you can cancel after 14 days, but that's the first 14 days. After that, you can't cancel. So getting it is worth it. So just make sure that you do that is if you can. Now, let's talk about color for a second. This website here is called colormatters.com. It covers the theory of color as well as the use of color and the science behind color. It is a great website for you to get behind and take a look at. I would start when you come to this website. I would start probably here under color and design and this basic color theory section right here and start like everything underneath this color and design section first. It's just a bunch of different articles covering and talking about color, and then I would go from this to possibly color and marketing because that will tell you about branding and using color and why certain colors evoke certain moods, certain feelings, why certain colors are used in certain brands and things like that. Color and symbolism, the meaning of colors, that's always important to kind of learn off of. Color in the body, this is how color works on people, from babies to adults to older people. Color and vision, how you see color and why it works the way it does. The science behind colors and how colors are made, things like that. This site here is Adobe Color. Adobe Color is the site that you use to create your own colors. So if I go to this create section up here, and again, I'm just touching on this a little bit because we may visit some of these sites in certain videos, and I don't want to kind of be too redundant on things. You have the ability to make, according to this, up to 20 colors at one time for a project. So that's the purpose of this, to be able to create colors for your project. And it's just a way in which you create it. You have a color mode that you can pick from. RGB is going to be the one you use. And then you have your main color, which is this first one here with this little black triangle on it. That's your main color that you start with. So you can use this color wheel here to kind of get the color to what you want, or you can click on these little sliders here to open up and make your own color with these little sliders, whether you're guessing at it or you're typing in the number from 0 to 255 for the color that you want. Once you got the color that you want, you can go with your different color harmonies, which you can learn about the different color harmonies from that Color Matters site. But you got your different color harmonies, or you can go here to custom under the color harmonies and then just make your own colors up. Just go one at a time and just make up your own colors that you want for each one of these. From 5 to 20 colors, 2 to 20 colors that you can make accordingly, and just make up your own color scheme as you need. Use it, save it. When you're saving it, you're giving the color your own theme name, and then you can save it with your Creative Cloud account. You save it under your account, you go into Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and all the other different Adobe programs, be able to pull these colors up. Numbers matter, meaning that whatever numbers that you get for that color, that's what's more important than the way the color looks. So the numbers in RGB, you got one, like for this one, the main color is 142, 150, and 113. Those are the red, the green, and the blue respectively. But I also have this value right here, which is this by this pound sign. It's called a hexadecimal number. It is the number that the computer understands the color to be. So the computer understands this hex number. We, body, understand RGB. That's how we seeing it. But the hex number works a lot easier with communication. So you can take the hex number down, write it down, give that to somebody that get this exact same color on their computer. to be able to use, because numbers don't lie. So communication wise, I would do the hex number each and every time for every project that you do. There are almost every time when you're doing a project, when you're doing our labs and projects where you're going to specify what colors you're using. Doing it, putting it in by the hex number makes it so much easier to communicate and tell people instead of the RGB numbers. So that's something that you're going to have to do. Fonts. It is advised to use this website here, fonts.adobe.com. This is all the fonts that Adobe, remember I told you in its early days, Adobe was a type foundry. What they did is they took all the fonts that they control, that they own in some kind of way, have license in which to showcase and use. They made a website for them. So that way you can go and pick and choose from them. And when you find one that you like, I'm just going to click on one of these. You'll be able to see examples of what it looks like. You'll be able to see all the different variations in the family, because the family is basically all the different variations: the bold, the italic, the underline, the Cyrillic, all those different styles, as they call them. That's the family. And you can look at all the different variations in the family, add that font, add the whole family in as so you can use. And then when you get to your programs, they're already there. So there'll never be a font missing when you're doing a project. If you use the fonts from here. If you go to Google Fonts or any other free font website that's out there, you got to install those fonts, and then you got to make sure that you package them with your projects in order to get those fonts for passing that project to somebody else on for your computer. That becomes a mess. And you do have some built-in features within your programs to alleviate some of that mess, but not every last one of them. But if you use the ones from here, they're always going to be embedded with the project file. So it's always advisable to do that little piece of the process. All right, I think that's it here that I need to tell you. That gives everybody kind of a baseline with things. Make sure you're reviewing everything that's in that guides folder, because it, again, reiterates and covers the stuff I was just talking about. Take a look at your syllabus. Make sure you're reviewing everything that is in your syllabus there, because that's going to give you a lot of information and tell you things and guide you with information. Reach out to me whenever you need to for anything that needs to be covered or covered again that you weren't quite sure about, and let me know what your process is and your progress is. Thanks very much. Part 3 is coming in a few minutes, and thanks for being here.